from like probably our second or third record, there was this just all of a sudden, it was almost like all of a sudden everyone in Brazil knew who we were. Like the first time we ever played in Germany, you would have thought, like you said the Beatles earlier, you would have thought we were the Beatles because it was chaos, like a great kind of chaos when we played. And it was fun. It was fun. It made it really fun.
Today's youth need teachers, volunteers, and most of all, well, they need you. I'm Doug Edwards, and I'm going to be talking with real youth mentors and students to give you the knowledge you need to be the best youth worker possible. This is Youth Worker on Fire.
Oh, you're trying to bring me down and run me out of town. You're taking what you want, but you can't take my rhythm now. I'm walking to my own beat, just gonna be me. I'm not replicating nobody.
Hey, Youth Worker on Fire. This is Doug Edwards, and welcome, Youth Worker Nation. Hey, I've got my friend here, Justin Cox. And Justin, I'm going to read you his bio because it's too good for me to mess up by trying to have it memorized, even though I know a lot of stuff about the guy. So Justin Cox was born on April 10th, 1977 in Leesburg, Florida, which is not far from where my home is here. He was born to Joan and Jerry Cox. And by the way, Joan and Jerry, amazing people. I knew them in the school system forever. Joan was a librarian, media specialist for many years. Jerry was principal. Well, I think he was a teacher at one time too, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was a teacher first.
And then principal, assistant superintendent, which is where I spent most of my time with your dad. And then went back to be a principal again. He has a brother, Jeremy. Jeremy's, how many years older is he than you?
Jeremy's 2 years older than me.
2 years, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then he grew up in the church, but didn't truly ask Jesus to his heart until he was in middle school. Around the age of 13, he took up guitar, and 2 years later was in the first band in Eustis, Florida. After playing in multiple bands through high school and college, Justin decided it was time to call it quits. Shortly after college, he moved to Washington State, but decided it wasn't for him. Too cloudy and gloomy. Really, Justin? Are you sure? But anyway, and moved back to Florida, where he joined a band for fun, which ended up turning into a very exciting career in the Christian music industry. The band is Fireflight. Fireflight has been nominated for 9 Dove Awards and 1 Grammy Award. The band took him all across the world, playing in nearly every state in the U.S., Germany, Switzerland, Finland, Norway, the Netherlands, and Croatia. Justin is currently married with 2 children and 1 on the way, and lives in Michigan. He met his wife, Jessica, while touring in 2007. He currently works as a worship pastor and arts director for Mile High City Church.
Just Mile City.
Oh, Mile City. You know what? I'm so used to thinking Colorado.
Yeah.
Everything's Mile High.
We did that
Sorry,
a lot.
buddy. I bet you.
Yeah.
They're going, is this Denver? No, it's
Oh.
okay. Mile City Church, and designs websites as a side hustle. Nobody does side hustles. Are you kidding me? Come on.
No one in ministry does side hustles.
Yeah. And everybody in ministry listening to this are going, yeah, I do.
Yeah, me too.
Everybody does, And so here you are. You're in Michigan now, a Florida boy, but you're like many of us that got really to where we like the cold for fun, like to do that snowboarding and skiing thing. But listen, before we go into that, just catch us up to date. That probably covers a lot of it, but just tell us some things that are happening.
I mean, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. That's 30,000 foot view. Legitimately was planning on never being in a band again. And then all of a sudden I find myself writing songs and getting signed to, was Flickr Records, which was Audio Adrenaline's label, which then got bought by Sony, which then made things take off even more. And then after, I think it was about 8 or 9 years of full-time touring, I was good. And I did leave out one country in there that I can't believe I did. It's Brazil. They are rabid Fireflight fans in Brazil, and we loved playing there. But it was a really cool thing for a long time. But I'm a homebody, apparently. Being around lots of people for a lot of the time can turn you into somewhat of an introvert. So I was ready to be, just spend time with my wife and our young family. And yeah, it was, and then music, I figured after I stopped touring, I'd be done with that. So I ended up being a lighting director at a church up here. Learned how to do lighting and all that stuff. And then one of the guys that got hired on said, "Hey, you guys know Justin's a musician. Why is he in the lighting booth?" And they said, "Oh, yeah." So then that's when I started leading worship, and it's been really cool. It's definitely something I never saw myself doing, but here I am. I've been doing it for about 8 years now, leading worship.
God has a funny way of doing things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, do you feel like it was a God thing?
Oh, yeah.
I'm taking for granted that it was, but
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's when I was growing up, when you were my youth pastor, like there wasn't really a position per se at a church for worship pastor or music director. It was just, you found volunteers or people that were really talented at it or hoped the pastor could sing some. And then that was kind of like where you started. But now it's a very specific high demand job, high demand being like they need people to do it because it is a very popular thing in churches now. But, I feel like I came off the road at the right time. I think God orchestrated that and then gave me a few years to kind of chill out and build cool lighting scenes at a church and then said, all right, now it's time for something completely different. And I'm going to stretch you in all kinds of ways that you may not be ready for, but here we go.
Yeah. And what people don't know about you, and I want them to know this about you, and there's so many, Justin Cox, you are such a complex person. You have so much in there. You know this, but you don't talk about it. But anyone that knows you even relatively well knows this. For some reason, our program, and I am nowhere, all of us have genius levels. Everybody does. They're usually not, most of ours aren't defined in the school system.
No.
But yours were, and that was the amazing thing. I ended up with a valedictorian or salutatorian in our student ministry almost every year. I was the guy that kept away from people like that growing up, going, no, you're going to lower their IQ average. So, what? No, wouldn't let me hang out. But anyway, so it was always funny. I tell people it's because my wife was so smart, that you guys would show up. And she is, and she was. But you were valedictorian of your class your senior year. I mean, it was just hands down. I don't think anybody came close as far as I could remember. And you're just this brilliant guy that could have done anything. You probably were good in all the areas that geniuses need to be good in to do whatever you wanted to do. What was your, you got A's and everything, but tell me, was it math or was it English or where was your literature? Where was your biggest bent as far as just education?
You mean the thing I liked the most?
Like the most, did the best in, the easiest to you?
Like I really didn't like math. I didn't care for science that much. I liked English because I could manipulate my way into finding a good answer that would work.
Yeah, that is true, isn't it?
Yeah,
you could. Yeah, I get that.
My mom always said I should be an attorney, but like I just wasn't about like fighting for people who I knew were liars. And like once I realized, Matlock is, a lot of people may not remember Matlock, but that was like, oh, cool. He's fighting for justice and all good always wins. But then like I did one jury duty. I think I was in high school and the guy was like 100% stealing from his company. But the problem was that the attorneys filed the wrong charges. So because they filed the wrong charges, he got off.
Right.
And so I saw that and I was just like, man, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to be the guy who finds the loopholes for the criminals. Like, I want to be the guy who helps the innocent guy get off. And I knew I wouldn't be able to do one without the other. So I was like, I'm not doing that. Then I was like, I'm going to be an optometrist because I have friends who make a lot of money being an optometrist. Then I realized, oh, there's a whole lot of math and science. So nope.
But once again, you made A's in math and science. You could have done any of them. It's just that you didn't like it.
Yeah, I didn't like it. I just knew there was something different for me. And I ended up in film in college, doing film and shooting music videos for my projects because I always liked music and I liked that there was a story. And in fact, that was kind of like that manipulation thing again. I'm going to use a different word for that instead of manipulation. That was my efficiency kicking in. Like there's already a soundtrack and there's already a story. So all I have to do is visualize it and shoot it.
Right. Creative. I mean, the bottom line is it's not manipulation. It's creativeness, being able to tell a story the way you want the story to be told.
Right.
And so some people will say, well, you can use that for manipulation in a bad way. But manipulating is not necessarily a bad term all the time. We just feel like it is because of things we've seen that were manipulated against us.
Right.
Some things are being manipulated for us to win so that you can turn. There's a guy by the name of Chris Voss, #1 FBI hostage negotiator. Well, do you want him manipulating the bad guys a little bit?
Yeah, for sure.
That's right. And so his formula ended up being the #1 formula that you use in everything that helps people to think beyond themselves by saying certain things that were very simple. And he said the only reason that people would get shot in a hostage negotiation unless there was a thing called the black swan. Black swan meaning that thing that you know is out there probably, but you've never seen it before. But usually that's not the case. It's most people are predictable. And so they would respond to certain trigger words to the amygdala of the brain. And so you'd use those simple trigger words, how and seems like. And it would change the whole character of everything. But you would create these things and you liked it. In fact, I used to see in the studio later after college in the audio studio at Tip Tops, they had a studio, you know. All right. We had a little bit of history together.
Yeah. I forget about the fact that was in there sometimes. We were just talking about Mike Helms and his dad, but Mike taught me how to do all that. Like, the only reason I know how to use this thing is because of Mike.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he's the man. Michael, the sound guy, is his podcast.
Yeah. And now we're like, side note, this thing is like essentially a microphone emulator. So it can simulate any classic tube powered microphone. And I got it to start recording some music stuff.
Tell us about that mic. What kind is it?
Man, it's a Slate Digital VMS ML, I think is what it's called. And basically, you can choose from hundreds of different mics. And then it's got a digital preamp rack. One of my friends that I work with has all the actual hardware. So he's got some classic, really expensive mics. And then I bought this for like less than a tenth of the cost of one of his mics, just to show him like you can sell all your crap and and start all over for $500.
So middle school, we knew each other probably because I was on campus some. You're in high school, you're in club with us, and we called youth group club because it came from a Youth for Christ background. Grew up in the church, but ended up with Youth for Christ, and they taught me what I knew about working student ministry, something I never thought I would ever do. Because I was in the music industry as well. That's where I was headed. It's what I did for college and all that. And so here's Justin. You know, it was amazing for me to be a part of your life. You're also a part of what was First Baptist, I believe, at that time, and now is Life Point Church, a great church in its own rights. Then you left, and you went to the University of Florida, did your gig there. I believe you went snowboarding with us. Did we do the college thing when you were in college? What years did we do that with you?
Oh, man, we did. Like, I think it was 98 and 99. Maybe 2000. I can't remember.
Yeah, because that would be about right for the time that we started. We ended up doing 16 years of that in a row. I don't know if you realize that.
I didn't.
Yeah, I know. You wish you would have gone to each one. I know, right?
When people try to tell me I should go snowboarding up here, and then I went by one of the snowboarding hills of Michigan, and I was like, yes. I can't. Like, I can't do that. Like, I literally went down the back bowl of a mountain in Vail. Like you can't tell me this.
Oh, you were on that one. That's where you were on one of those. Yeah, we did Vail. Yeah, several times.
The
Yeah,
15-second ride down a hill is not going to cut it.
And if you haven't been, guys, you can't get it. And I was on the East Coast forever, and I still, when we were doing Colorado, was still taking. Remember, we're from Florida. We're Florida here. So you take sand kids to snow, you take snow kids to sand, right?
That's right.
To the tropics, whatever. To give them a broader vision of who God is, what they do, and excite them about life. And that's what we did. But yeah, man, I mean, you're explaining it exactly.
And then if you're skiing with a man named Dave Letourneau, like I was.
Oh, you were on those trips with Dave. Oh, yes.
You are witnessing a man facing the death in the face and surviving somehow.
Oh man, listen, you had to have been on the first trip where we went to Sunlight Mountain. Was that it? Did you go a couple of them?
I went to 2 or 3 of them.
Because David was with us the first time. Jim Budzinski talked me into letting David go. And there was a triple black in Sunlight Mountain, which is where we spent the last 5 years going. David said, "What are you guys looking at?" Because we were looking over the edge going, oh my goodness, we're looking straight down and there are trees everywhere, you know? And so David jumps off, I'm going. And he goes and he just falls all over the mountain. You know? It's just like I forgot what they called a garage sale. You know, is what
yard
they
sale.
call those.
Yeah.
Yard sale. There you go. And so I don't know if you're on that one.
I don't think I was on that one.
I don't think you jumped like that anymore. Yeah. Because you did the Vail thing in different ones.
Yep.
Yeah.
Vail, Breckenridge, Keystone were where we went the time.
We have the 5 mountain pass, but we're able to do 3.
Yep. And Bojo's.
Oh, Bojo's.
Yeah.
Please. Thank you.
Which my wife's aunt lives out there, and she knew what Bojo's was when I said it. And I was like, oh, thank you, Jesus. Someone else knows what this place is.
Someone understands.
So I just am ready for another dude ranch in my life right now.
Let's kind of catch everybody up to date. One is this. You went through high school club, you went into college, and then you went out to Washington State. I don't know if you remember, but I was begging you to come back because I wanted you to be a staffer. And you came back and you staffed, whether it was for me or because God told you to or whatever, or you got, too gloomy out there. And so you did middle school club, then you did high school club, you went on the trips. So tell me, who is that person that just flipped your switch and made you think about what you wanted to do in life?
Well, I think it was a combination. I think like you building such a great program, like first of all, for a middle school guy, it was appealing to know that this was, to be shallow about it, because I was in middle school and I was shallow. I wanted to go to a cool thing. So you made it cool. And that was awesome. So you're the first part of that puzzle. And then when I got there, it's Steve Trush, man. He's the reason I'm where I am right now. It was weird when I got back because I came down for Steve's service,
memorial service, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And I got back and I had written out this thing because I had to lead worship the next morning, and I had written out this thing that I was going to say prior for, like, I have a ministry moment. I have an opportunity to, speak in between songs or whatever. And I just threw it all in the garbage because I realized in that moment, like, we were doing the song Homecoming by Bethel. It's about, what it's going to be like when we finally just make it home to heaven. Just the idea that, the first line is, Lord, I confess I've stolen your breath, and sing my own song. And I realized, like, gosh, I could have done that. Like, God gave me these gifts to play music and to sing and to write music. And it was a guy like Steve that helped me realize, like, this is actually not impractical or not out of the question that I could do something with these gifts and glorify God, like, the whole time. Because who else is going to take their guitar and play Freebird in the middle of church? And Steve. And the first time I ever played a song that I wrote in front of people, I asked Steve to play with me. I don't know if you remember. It was like one of those nights we used to do at Trinity where we would like whoever. It's like kind of like a talent show, and it was kind of open mic. And I did a song that I wrote, and I said, "Hey Steve, I can't tell you what key this is in because I don't know what that means. And but I'm gonna play this song. Do you want to play something with me?" And he did. And it was the first time I ever played and sang from something that I wrote. And then I would say, like, from that, Coach Blake, because like in all the while, all three of you guys are working together in my high school and our middle school. And, you know, Coach was just this guy, this super soft, gentle, kind man. He's my economics teacher and my soccer coach. And I just remember him saying, "Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about soccer, but I was a drill sergeant, so I know how to make you and get you in shape."
Yes.
And so it was like this weird, like a trifecta of you creating a place for all of us to get together. For me personally, that's where Steve stepped in. He basically said, "You can do this. So let's foster that. Let's grow it, and let's turn it into something that maybe you can use someday." And then Coach Blake giving me this crazy work ethic. And then all the while you guys knew each other, you're friends, and you're all men that were confident in who you were and in the Lord, and guiding like me and all these other guys and girls along the way. So I mean, it's like that. It's all three of you guys.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
So let's go to Fireflight though.
Yeah.
How in the world, and by the way, you guys saved our butts. We were looking for, I hope we can say Glutamus Maximus on a conservative podcast so that the rest of the world, yeah, there you go. So because we did this thing called Sold Out, big event, we were literally trying to connect an entire couple of counties, and without actually going to Night of Joy at Disney World or Rock the Universe at Universal Studios. We wanted something that was local, that was as impacting as those things. And your band showed up for that billing and got us through that. Tell us your band members, though, because you guys are still recording.
Yeah, band members are Dawn, our singer, Glenn and Wendy Drennan. They're married. Glenn is our other guitarist, and he was actually up here 2 days ago, and I got to have lunch with him. And then Wendy, his wife, she plays bass. At the time, it was a drummer named Philip. He hasn't been in the band for a while. He left to pursue a career in speaking. We don't really have a permanent drummer right now, but a friend of ours named Adam McMillian, he played drums on the last few records. He was in the band right before I stopped touring, and then he quit shortly after I did. Stopped touring shortly after I did. But we recorded a new record a couple of years ago and put it out, and it was fun to do. I mean, there were no expectations or requirements. We just did what we wanted to do and had fun. And everybody's older now and has kids, and so no one wants to tour. We just want to, like, if we have a way to make music and it doesn't cost us anything, then awesome. So, well,
you're right up there with the big boys. I believe the Beatles, I think, kind of went that route after a while.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. I mean, everybody knows that. Everybody that's ever done any sort of shows, even like youth choir, like when kids that did youth choir and stuff, it's a lot of work to like travel and then set up and then tear down and then do it again the next day. And we went hard. We went like 150 shows plus a year. So it was a lot of work.
That was to help pay the bills too.
Yeah, that was my only job for about 8 years.
Yeah, so you had to hit it hard because in Christian music, you're not going to get quite the money you do in the secular world. And then in either world in the music industry, it is a job, even though it's ministry for ministry, but whether it's secular or whether it's Christian, a lot of work.
Yep.
And you're going to pay your dues to make it happen.
Yep. And then honestly, sadly, there were times when we did a weekend. I remember very specifically, we did a weekend in Texas, and we played 4 shows, and only one person paid us, and it was a really and that's like, it was a random situation, but it did happen sometimes. So these guys that are out there working hard and playing shows, and the last thing you want to hear especially right now, when you're trying to fill up a van or a bus with gas, last thing you want to hear is like, well, you do this for the ministry, right? Yes, we do this for the ministry, but we also need to put gas in our thing and eat.
That's right. And Mark Moore, you don't know him, but he's on one of our episodes. And Mark was a missionary to Uganda, and he ended up creating a company. Someone else had created the product, but they wanted to make it cheaper to sell. A product that cures SAMs, a severe acute malnutrition, the babies' bellies that are all swollen, all that. There's a cure for that. Wow. And UNICEF found it. He came and said, somebody needs to build it so we can do it cheaper. And he did. He says, we are a nonprofit organization. He says, but we have to make profit, even though we're a nonprofit, because he said, we have to pay the bills or we have to shut down.
Right.
And so people don't understand that. And for those of you that are in Christianity and you've hired bands, because it happened all the time in the name of Jesus, and guys would, by faith, our buddy with Tip Top's T-shirts, great ministry guy, but his business, not a nonprofit, did so much ministry through there, but people in ministry would take advantage of them.
Yep.
Yeah, and so those guys that are in bands and arts and things like that, and we think, well, they're in ministry, we don't have to pay them. Well, that's not true. You need to pay them more, and you need to find a way to do that because you're in sin if you're not taking, I'm serious.
Yeah.
If you're not taking care of those guys. We don't take care of ministers. We don't, because in the name of Jesus, they should suffer for Jesus. No, all of us should suffer for Jesus, and all of us should sacrifice so that these ministries go on and we take advantage. And that's one reason for the podcast too. I know that youth pastors are taken advantage of and hurt and ruined, and pastors and all kinds of people, Christian musicians. And I'll tell you what, I'm not for it. I'm not happy about it. And I don't mind voicing it. And I have many times on the show. But yes, you guys were taken advantage of way too many times. And one time was too many.
And it's, don't get me wrong, like it didn't happen as often as I honestly expected it to, because you kind of go into those situations like, oh man, there's only like 30 people here. They're not going to be able to pay us. But those were the ones that were surprisingly like, you know what, we made a commitment and we're going to honor that commitment. But yeah, no, there were just a few times, and it was such a bummer too, because like when you'd hear the phrase, well, you're in this for the ministry, like you wanted to fight back and just say, yeah, but also like I have a family, and also like we can't afford now to get to where we're going next. And those are the times when you're just really frustrated and sad. But for the most part, it was a really cool thing, a really cool experience. Like I said, like you said earlier, like there's only one state we didn't play in, and that's Hawaii. And we were scheduled to play Hawaii, and it got canceled because we were going to play on July 4th at Pearl Harbor, and it got canceled because of some sort of logistic. So that was such a bummer, but we were all amped up and ready to go to Hawaii for the first time.
Oh yes. Oh yeah. You guys got your families. You're still recording when you can. Did Brazil pick up quite a bit on your last album?
Yeah, Brazil from like probably our second or third record, there was this just all of a sudden, it was almost like all of a sudden everyone in Brazil knew who we were. And they were like, come to Brazil, come to Rio, come to Brasilia, which is the capital. And then it was like the month after I stopped touring, I got a call from Glenn. He's like, hey man, you're never going to believe this. We just got an offer for 2 shows in Brazil. And I was like, ah. He goes, and I can't imagine playing it with anyone else. So I got to go do those 2 shows.
Oh, that's good.
And then a few years later, we got another offer to play Rio at the Olympic Park. So we got to go do that too. But it was awesome. We went there, everyone there so loving, and they were just all so kind and excited. It was every time we went overseas, people were just excited to have music, and it was really cool to watch joy on people's faces. Like the first time we ever played in Germany, you would have thought, like you said, the Beatles earlier, you would have thought we were the Beatles, because it was chaos, like a great kind of chaos when we played.
That is amazing.
And it was fun. It made it really fun. And the last record did surprisingly well. And I mean, it's still doing things. I feel like there's like everyone's had so much pop music for so long that you hear these little inklings of rock music coming back, and like those are like the cool songs that people do that are like, wow, this is a special song because there's electric guitar on it, when that's all there was before. So, maybe there's a thing coming, and maybe we'll have to do another record. But
well, let me tell you, you've got plenty of time. And the reason I'm saying this is because I read an article, and I cannot believe what I read, but that just a few years ago, South America caught up with who the Rolling Stones were. And the biggest tours, I believe it was the biggest tours of their life, were in the past few years in South America. How old is Mick Jagger now? 80 years old?
He's pretty much invincible if you think about it. Like, how is he
the
still...
whole band is. The
Yeah.
Beatles, half of, two are dead, two are alive, but the Rolling Stones, that's like, are you kidding me? But they are still all alive and still doing their thing. So
nuts.
crazy. And by the way, I don't know if you heard Ryan, my son's episode, but we talked quite a bit about you and about the worst tour of your life, which was the best education of his life.
It was. Now, on that tour, our bus broke down 2 or 3 times. I can't remember. We had the trailer situation. We missed a show. We got stuck in Gillette, Wyoming for like 3 days where there's literally nothing to do. We all packed in a 12-passenger van, and there were like 10 of us, and drove overnight to a show in Las Vegas. That was the best next day because we had a rental tour bus that was way nicer than our bus, and got to like chill for a while. Dude, it was something. That was a tough tour, but it was our first. We sold out a show for the first time ever on that tour. So there were a lot of great things on that tour too. It was our first real headlining tour, and it was hard work, and it was hard. It was for sure hard for Ryan because he had never experienced, like, we're going out for like 4 weeks and we're going to be gone for 4 weeks. Like, there's no turning back.
And of course, now he says best thing that ever happened to him, and it was.
Yeah.
You got to know what kind of pain you're up against, and most people don't. You let him know up front what kind of pain it takes to be a professional in music.
Yeah. And I think you could see that too. Like I wasn't just like, and all of us, we weren't just like getting, like, we'd play the show, go get in the bus and go to bed. Like, we were working. And so like, it wasn't just like, we were like, all right, Ryan, and it was Ken and one other guy, Jason. Ryan, Ken, and Jason, you guys go figure this out. Like, we were out there doing the work. So he knew that it wasn't just that it was hard because it was just a few people. It was hard because it was hard.
Ministry is hard. Ministry is warfare. I tried to always remind my volunteer staff, and I had to remind myself, wait a minute, we're at war. We're at war.
Mm-hmm.
This is a battle. Scripture never soft sells it. Jesus was always talking about the warfare, the things that demons. I mean, he speaks specifically about demons and angels. We tend to think that we can not do that or overcome that or whatever it is we do. And I think sometimes it's like shell shock, as it would be in wartime. But you guys were going through not only the music industry, not only all that stuff, but you were going through shell shock of just being bombarded by satanic pressure as well as natural pressures.
Yeah, it's a real thing. I mean, you're like, why is this happening? And you have to take a step back and realize not only is it just a hard thing to do, and you feel like, man, I feel like everything's against me. Well, literally everything's against you because the enemy's against you, and he doesn't want you to get to the next show. Because every show you make it to is another chance to speak truth into someone's life and to potentially change the course of their lives. We said multiple times when we were touring, like, I can't imagine ever wanting to do this if it weren't for like helping people find God. Because what would you fall back on? Like, what would you fall back on when things get hard? Because, we had Jesus, we had that kind of strength, but, the bands in the secular world that don't have that, because there are some that do have that, they just don't talk about it. But the ones that don't have that, man, when you fall down, when you're having a hard time getting back up, you've got nothing but your own strength. And that's a scary place to be.
Yeah, it is. Well, tell me about your love story with Jessica.
So we were on this tour with a couple other bands, and we had 3 shows in Michigan, and they were on the east side of the state, the center part of the state, and then, the west part of the state in Grand Rapids. On the 3rd show, Glenn, our other guitarist, got pretty sick, and so he missed that show, and then we were driving back across the state to go to Buffalo from Grand Rapids, Michigan. We had 2 days to get there. We stopped at a restaurant, and he collapsed walking out of the restaurant, so we had to take him to a hospital.
Wow.
Got IV and rehydrated, so we skipped that next show, which was good because it turns out it got canceled. And every other band got stuck in a highway rest stop because there was so much snow. So it worked out for us. But the first day I was there, I met this girl on the first Michigan show, and she was friends with a friend of mine from California. So she was like, hey, I live in this area. Why don't we go get coffee? So I went and got coffee with her. And then the next day she's like, hey, I want you to meet my friend Jessica. So the next day I went and met Jessica, who's my wife. She was pretty cool. I just assumed that she was like out of my league or taken, but she was not. So that was super convenient. Then the last night that we were there, everybody in the band except for the guy who was sick and his wife, we all went to Macaroni Grill, and Jessica and her friend went. I don't know. I just kept talking to her. That's when MySpace was a thing. So we communicated via MySpace. Kept talking, and then after that tour was over, I flew up and visited her, and just worked out really well. She actually moved to Haiti for 6 months, 3 months after I met her, though, because she had committed to this program where she was going to live there and work at a medical clinic. Basically, I met her, saw her 2 times, and then she moved to Haiti for 6 months. When she got back, we had just finished a tour, so I flew up to see her at that, and that was really cool. And it was kind of a good test whether or not, because that was, this is like 1,000 years ago, right? So like I was still having to buy prepaid phone cards to talk to her internationally because phone plans didn't work that way. So we didn't talk that much. We didn't really see each other that much, obviously. There was no FaceTime because our internet was so bad. We got married like a year and a half or 2 later. I'm trying to remember the timeline. We got engaged in Germany at our Germany show, which was really cool. And then a year after that, we got married, went on a honeymoon, and 3 days after our honeymoon, went on tour for 3 months.
Oh, wow. So she was with you on tour.
Yeah, she was.
She is a tough person.
She is.
All right, Justin, listen, anything else you want to tell us? What would you tell youth workers about trying to stay for a longer period of time? The average youth worker stays 18 months. That's ever since I've been to student ministry forever, it seems like that is the average. The average volunteer stays for a year. You know, our guys stayed a whole lot longer than that. Steve Trush was in for at least 27 of my 29 years that we talked about. So anything that you would say to them about working with students?
I'm actually surprised about the 18-month thing. It makes sense, like if I think about it, but 18 months is, I guess think of it this way, 18 months is not even 2 full school years for a student, and kids more than ever need consistency. I have friends who have just gotten into helping with the student program at my church, and they plan on being in for at least 2 to 3 years because they know that these kids are, especially coming out of what we came out of the last couple of years, need someone that's strong in their faith, consistent, and is feeding them truth rather than opinion. Because all they get and all they consume a lot of the time on their phones is opinion and a false sense of reality. Because people are putting only their best up, they don't put their worst up. I would say break that 18-month cycle and make it 3 years. At least spend an entire run through middle school with a kid, at least spend 3/4 of a high school career with a kid, because that extra 18 months is going to make a big difference. I just know from my personal experience, like they're going to tell you things that they're not going to tell their parents, which is a touchy place to be, but it's also a very privileged place to be, that you have that level of trust with them. And obviously, Doug, I think you and I have talked about this before, like knowing when it's too dangerous to not say anything. But there are things that these kids will trust you with as a youth worker that they won't even trust their best friends with. And that's a big deal. And that's worth, to me personally, I would give an extra 18 months of my life to make sure that kid was okay. So I'd say stay in there, hang in there, man. It's just think about how much it would have meant to you if you had someone walking alongside of you your entire high school career versus like a third of it, or even a quarter, really.
And now let's move this to music. What was the easiest song you ever wrote?
Easiest song I ever wrote was a song called He Weeps. And it was just about some real life people, things we were dealing with on the road, like some experiences with people that we had and stories they were telling us. Probably took an hour and a half.
Wow, that's fast.
It was real fast.
Favorite song you've ever sung with a band, with your band?
It's called Escape. We only did it twice, and it was in Brazil both times. The second show we played down there, it's a different time zone down there. Like, as far as like, everybody's like, yeah, it's fine. Like, we're running a little late. It's fine. We went on at like 12:30 in the morning, and they were going hard the whole time.
Most famous person you've met on tour?
Oh, this is a tough one because there's a few. Most famous person I met on tour that meant the most to me was Brian Welch from Korn. Yeah, he was playing a show with his band. We played on the main stage, and his band played on the side stage at a festival. My buddy was his front of house guy, and he asked me if I want to be Brian's guitar tech. And I was like, yes, I want to be Brian's guitar tech. And he said, what are you doing? Brian said, because I'd already met him once. And he goes, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm your guitar tech. And he goes, why are you just played main stage. I was like, so you're like my hero. But it was cool. It's such a normal guy.
Well, listen, God bless you, brother. I am just blessed and thankful. I'm grateful for you. You've held a lot of moments in my life that made life better. Your family has been gracious to loan you out to me when you were younger, and you yourself to my family and my son. It's people like you that I want the world to know the investment of time in student ministry with you is worth everything. And what I've told my volunteer staff, and I'm telling everyone in Youth Worker World, Youth Worker Nation, I'm telling you that the middle schoolers that you work with are going to sign your paycheck someday. They're going to be the bands and the occupations that feed your children spiritually, physically, emotionally, that are going to be your doctors, your lawyers, your engineers, that are going to be your pastors, that are going to be your friends. And those investments are not these little snotty kids or these weird hormone-driven teenagers. No, they're people that if you invest in them, love them, and treat them as somebody that you see as unique and incredibly talented and getting ready to bust open the world, that they will replenish your life over and over and over again, as you have done for me. And so, brother, love you. Have a great night.
You too. Love you, Doug. Thank you.
Love you too, buddy. See ya.
You've been listening to the Youth Worker on Fire podcast. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and tell your friends. Also, leave a comment and tell us what you think. Stay tuned for more informative episodes.